There you go. I think it started on my end, so.
Brilliant. Okay, so creating and managing a process catalogue. This is quite an interesting one. It's actually come up quite a few times recently, but is something that I've certainly found very valuable in the past. And we had a fairly in-depth conversation about it when we covered the Centre of Excellence model not so long ago. So that was one of the reasons for putting this session in now. I suppose before I start is just maybe talk a little bit about what I mean, certainly, by a process catalogue. So I think of it a bit like a catalogue that you'd get in a library, so in a traditional library. If you think about the catalogue is the list of all the books that the library holds. So it's not the actual physical library with all the books in it themselves, but it's that list of all the books. It's the ISBN numbers, it's the name of the book, the author, potentially where you'd find it on the shelf if you were going to go and look for it, how many copies there are, and that sort of thing. And of course, as you know, when you go to visit a library, the catalogue is actually quite a good thing to go and look up first of all, or even look for similar books in the same area or same topic. And that's essentially the same concept that I talk about here. Now, it's interesting when you're using a technology like SCORE to store processes in, because actually you could then argue that the library and the catalogue are kind of the same thing. But actually, and so by that I mean because you've got a database, you've stored the processes in it, so running a list of the processes is essentially can be the catalogue at the same time. But I think the distinction is quite useful, especially for organizations who are starting out on the journey of creating a process library, because, and this is something that we see a lot of organizations, they don't actually know what they're going to put in their library. As surprising as that might sound, we want everything in there, but what is everything? And so this is a good chance to sort of start to try and think that through. So before I go any further, has anyone here done this sort of exercise before? Create a sort of catalogue of processes that might be separate to the actual processes they've captured?
Well, I have done this as a quality certification. So in that regard, we have cataloged all the processes with regards to that certification with an ISO 9001. And I suppose this is the digital counterpart to that.
Yeah, interesting. I think actually next month, Sam, we've got a session on standards and compliance. Is that right? Indeed. Yeah. And so actually that's one of the things, we'll kind of look at that relationship between processes. That'll be something in the future. That'll be interesting. Alistair, I see you nod your head.
Yeah, mostly creating catalogues for the customers, as you know, how we're using the system. So it's a case of I think one of the biggest things for us is being able to create almost a menu into that process catalogue to start giving visibility of what's there. And it's that visibility bit which is probably one of the biggest things that customers miss. There's lots of processes which sit in folders on shelves traditionally. I remember when I started as an apprentice, we got bookcases of folders, and that's then moved online. But I suppose moving online reduces the visibility even more than the A4 arch lever files of chunky processes on shelves. So they become a step removed again from people seeing them. So having a place where you can get that digital view and seeing what's there and how it impacts the organisation is massive from my experience.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to a prospect last month, and they had been managing a process library on a shared drive. So it was PDF documents on a shared drive. And then they had this enormous Excel spreadsheet where they had a list of all the PDFs which folder they were in on the drive, who the process owner was, and all the information about it. And then they were using that Excel spreadsheet, or they were trying to actually give people access. So, hey, you can come in here and you can see a list of all the processes and you can search, and then they put URL links into the cells. And then somebody in IT changed the drive permissions. They couldn't access half the processes, and it'd been something like 2 months previously, and they still hadn't worked out how to give all the right permissions back. So yeah, it's funny how sort of trying to digitize these things from the old paper folders actually can make things sometimes more complex or more abstract. So as I say, why create a catalogue? Certainly one of the most common reasons we see is, as I mentioned before, it's about trying to work out, okay, what processes are we going to put into the library? Simply saying everything, oh, we're going to do all the sales and the marketing and the ops stuff, but what does that actually mean? How do you turn that into something that's tangible? Because if you don't have these processes documented already, or you've got them in some format that you think is out of date and needs to be brought up to date, you need to start thinking about how you're actually going to plan and do this. Which processes are going to be the high priority processes and which ones can wait till later. So it's a really, really important exercise to go through, as I say, to start trying to think about, to size what it is you're going to do. And it might be, again, that you've got specific initiatives that are driving this exercise right now, but at some point those initiatives will come to an end. And if you still have a vision of continuing to build out the library, then you need to know which are the ones that are going to be in scope right now, which are going to be for later on, and so on. And of course, the other thing we talked about in the Centre of Excellence session recently was about the review calendar. So again, the catalogue actually becomes a good tool for that, because it becomes the basis for, okay, now we know what all the processes are and we've captured them, or they're in progress. When are we going to review them, and so on. So what I'm going to go through today is a little bit about how to start creating that catalogue, how you'd start going about building one, and some of the features we can use in SCORE to do that, but also to then track progress through the catalogue. So I will share my screen. For anyone who hasn't seen it yet, I am using the latest version of SCORE, which we've been calling codename Spinnaker to date. But actually, as you'll see, pretty much everything that I'm going to take you through today, you can do in the current product. There are some aspects of it which are much better in Spinnaker, which I'll touch on as we go through. But one of the tools, and this is not the only tool, but certainly one of the tools that I found really useful for this exercise, especially when you're talking to an organization about the whole you're talking to an organization about cataloging all processes within the company, this is a really, really good way of doing it. I like to think, to start with, let's look at the high level architecture of your processes, and then start to break down to a logical level that makes sense for what we would define as a process that needs to be captured. The framework so my favorite one, it's not the only one. Again, if you were doing something that was, say, specific to IT services management, you might look at ITIL. If you were doing something, say, specific in telecoms, you might look at the ETOM framework, which would be another sort of high level framework of processes that you can use to start working out what there are. The one that I've picked here is the Apqc process classification framework. And if you're not familiar with it, I'll just quickly show you their website, apqc.org. They're a non-profit organization that creates sort of standards and benchmarking tools for people working in process management and process improvement. They publish the process classification framework, and they actually have several different ones. So if you go to the tools section and expand out, I'm using what they call the cross-industry version, so that's the generic version, but you can go into the industry version section and they have some industry-specific frameworks. So word of caution, when you download these, they come down as a spreadsheet. So it comes as an Excel file, and they have a tab for each of the main areas, and then you go into the tab and it's got a big long list of processes. It's a useful tool for seeing what's in there, but it can also be a little bit dangerous if you go too far into the detail. And the reason for that is I've seen organizations try to bend themselves to fit the framework. And actually what this is really it's a point of reference to help get you started. So for that reason, I've only included the top couple of levels, and I think it goes down to 4 levels of detail or so. What I found quite effective is when I do this exercise with a customer is to have the Apqc model as a spreadsheet open alongside, on another screen alongside it, and then work from this view in SCORE, because essentially Apqc is just a list of text. Then what I do, we have this as a standard template, which again we can provide. I'm not sure if this is on the template library, but we can certainly put it on there. And here I've got the top level, so you'll see it's broken down by operational processes versus support processes. And at a high level, you do develop the vision and strategy, develop and manage products and services, market and sell, deliver, and then manage customer services as the sort of key value chain. And then down here on the support processes, we've got the key things like HR, IT, finance, and so on, the other key areas of the business. I haven't migrated the whole model into Spinnaker yet, but I've got some sections of it. So I'll just drill down on a couple of these boxes so you can see what the next level looks like. So I tend to keep it at this level. I don't join the boxes up together. You can join them up at this point, but I find that in that initial conversation, what you have to do first of all is start with the default and then talk about how the organization is different. So for example, not all organizations will deliver physical products. So, one of the first things we do is delete that box. Another common thing where I see people deviate from the standard Apqc is here, Apqc bundled market and sales together, but a lot of organizations see those as separate parts of the business with a different owner, if you like. So you might have VP of sales and the chief marketing officer and the head of marketing. So again, we often end up splitting that box out and separating it. And then there's a good discussion about, okay, is this how you describe these key activities? Who is the role that goes on the top of these? Sam and I did one recently where essentially we ended up changing all of these to VP of product, VP of sales, VP of marketing, and so on. But you're then starting to change it into the language that they use. And it's for that reason why at the next level down, I tend to just keep these as sort of floating boxes, because we can then, if we need to change them or break them out, it's much easier to do. Again, at this level, it's still quite a high level, but they talk about develop and manage marketing plans. So you at this point, you actually might want to break down to the next level of detail and go, okay, right, marketing roughly breaks down into these 3 or 4 process areas. But in doing so, you're basically drilling down till you get to the point of going, that's a process that we need to capture and put into the process library. So that's the first step of the exercise. That's about kind of really getting a picture of where we are. And of course, what it gives you really nicely is the high level architecture, especially at the beginning, gives you a way to talk to other parts of the business going, hey, the area we're looking at sits in here or sits over there. Then what we can start to do in SCORE is, once we've identified what those boxes, we can then start to tag them as each box that we're going to go and map as a process, and tag it to say this is something we're going to add to the process catalog. So if I click on the attachments icon, I've created a custom field called process catalog. And so if I click on that, here I've then also put in a grouping. So I've kept it very, very simple and said, hey, look, we want to include this. We haven't started it yet, so I'll call it not started, and then I'll confirm that and save that against the box. Now what I've actually done is I've done that across some of the other boxes, and so some of these, so you'll see some of these boxes are different colors. We've got green and orange. So the reason that these are different colors is I've already put the custom field on them, and I've applied a style rule. So in this case, I've put the custom field on their process catalog. I've set it to in progress, and by having it as in progress, it's changed the color to orange. So visually now, I can also look at this architectural model, and I can say the grey boxes haven't started, the oranges are in progress, and then the greens are completed. So again, you've got that nice visual view just at a glance of the progress that you might be making through putting the catalogue into the workspace. Now, if I go back up to the top level, I'll just close the tab at the side there. So the other thing that that we can now start to do, which again is an improvement in Spinnaker with Score, is that you can now link directly to other things within the app much easier than you could before. So you could do this with some areas of the application, but not all of them. But one of the things I can do, because I've now tagged all of those boxes with the custom field, I can do things like create a progress view directly within Score. So if I go and click the view progress, what this is going to do is it's going to jump me to the analytics page for this particular custom field. He says, did I click the right thing? Okay, let's go look at it a slightly different way. Go and hit my process catalog. Okay, it came up that way. It was working before. I can create a direct link that goes to this particular page. So this is the analytics page for that custom field, and essentially it works in the same way as it does in the current product, except I've got a timeout. And what I was going to show you there is come back again. So when I just scroll down here, I can then see the groupings overview. And what this then shows me is essentially progress. So I can see that I've got 10 processes we haven't started yet. I've got 6 that are in progress, and then 6 that are complete. So again, I've got this kind of built straight into the application. I can quickly jump to this view. So as you see, I can navigate to it through the application by going through the workspace to analytics, or through a direct link, which normally works fine. I can also, from here, I can go and open a report view, which I could also have done direct from the process diagram, and that will also then give me the full view. So it will then list all of the processes that I want to capture that I've got in my catalog. I can see who the owner of that process should be. If I scroll across, I can then see which ones are not started, which ones are complete and in progress. And then I can do other things, like I can use the comment field in the custom field to actually capture information about what's happening. So here I can say, look, the finalising workshop's booked for the 1st of June. The first workshop for this one is scheduled for the 16th of June. So now all in one place, what this gives me is the ability to create the architecture to try and work out what the processes we need to do in it, create the catalogue with the custom fields and the reports, and then be able to track the progress through them. So whether, as I say, whether I've started them, whether I've completed them, or whether they're in progress, and with some high level notes on the top. So some of what I'm showing you today is what we already do today in terms of creating the architecture and using the custom fields to get them, to get to work out what's going to be in scope and what isn't. But certainly with Spinnaker, what we'll do is this becomes much more tightly integrated, and these reports become a bit more dynamic in terms of how we create them and track them moving forward. One of the things that we'll probably do a session on later or in future is another thing we can now do is we can actually expand these custom fields to include other types of fields. So we'll be able to turn our process catalogue into our review calendar in the future, be able to capture things like next review date, who the process champion might be, and all of those sorts of things. That's something we could potentially do in a future session. So at that point, I will stop and see if there are any questions or thoughts.